Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk, joining me is David Morassutti as usual. David, it's been it's a little over a week since the Grey Cup was played. Any any thoughts that come to mind that maybe we didn't share with the folks last week?
In terms of the Grey Cup, I mean, just trying to think. I mean, I think I pretty much summed it up last week when I said it was probably the craziest football game I'd ever watched. Like, and we've seen some crazy finishes in the CFL, like a final play or something. But in terms of like a final 5 minutes of a game, I don't think I've ever seen anything as crazy. What I'm hoping the CFL does after this type of game is how do they capitalize on the momentum that was built up from a lot of people talking about the game,
A lot
talking,
of people watching.
watching it. It did pretty well. It was up from last year, which is actually now some people were wondering, oh, are we going to see the CFL numbers going down? But it was good compared to last year because last year people weren't really allowed to go anywhere really still. There were still, restrictions at the time, if I'm not mistaken. So people have really not much else to do but to watch a Grey Cup. I found that, yeah, I think at 1.8 million people were watching this game.
Yep.
That's a great number. I mean, now we had something called,
8.7, I think, was the number that they said.
yeah, I mean, we
And
had something,
4.7 watched most of the game, stayed on the game.
okay. Yeah, because now if you want a comparison, like Canada in the World Cup was at 4.4 million, like from start to finish of the game as the average audience. 18.8 million watched at some part of the game. And I think something that needs to be said here, and we've talked about it too, and it's been discussed many times. The Canada game and a lot of other things on that TSN broadcasts, like the NFL, are on CTV and TSN. CFL, the Grey Cup, is just on TSN.
One
And
shot deal.
right? And so that's something that a lot of people still in the CFL still believe that the Grey Cup should get on CTV because TSN is a specialty channel that's not included in every cable package. This is why I don't know what the ratings were like when the game was on CBC, when CFL was on CBC, but it's made people really, really take note of what happens when only one network is showing the game or one channel is showing the game. So I still think,
One channel that you have to pay for, because a lot of viewers who will watch the Grey Cup aren't ordinary sports fans. Like, they're very casual. Like, they're people that go, "Oh, a championship." Like, when I was growing up, I had aunts and uncles who never watched a single CFL game during the season, and my grandmother too. But when it was the Grey Cup, it was like, "Oh, the championship." There's something about a championship that draws people to the TV. And if they don't have the channel to begin with, you're drawing flies that could be there.
of course, and I think that's why I was pretty encouraged by the number, just because of the game wasn't exactly as accessible as we think, as it should be, considering the Super Bowl, which we all know the Super Bowl. You can't compare the Super Bowl to the Grey Cup, but that still gets CTV coverage, right? That gets to every household, and that's why CFL fans have been really pushing to get that chair to make at least for the Grey Cup and the playoff games. The regular season. I mean, it's not like they're starving to. I mean, they do pretty decent numbers. I would just like to see if they had put the Grey Cup and the playoff games on CTV, what would happen? how many more people would tune in to the game if it was a little more accessible? And look, I also know that nowadays streaming is the way to go for a lot of people. Not everybody has cable or wants to
Do you
pay.
think they capture those numbers?
I don't think there's a. I don't know if those are released. TSN usually, the PR account usually puts out streaming numbers. But my guess is they just take whoever goes into the channel. Um, but I can't know for sure because they just say on TSN and RDS, right? They don't say you know how many were on television, how many were on the subscribed streaming platforms. I think it's just because there's so many different ways that people stream the game,
Hmm.
and maybe that's hard to measure. But yeah, it's something I've really looked into, and I think 2026 is when the new TV deal is up. And if I'm the CFL, they've always talked about how TS has been a great partner, but I think the idea of having an exclusive partner doesn't help the league, in my opinion. If other broadcasters had a stake in the league in terms of games, people said, look at how the NFL does it, where each you have a Sunday night game that goes to the NBC. You have the Monday night game that goes to Disney. You have the Thursday nighter that goes to Amazon. And then Fox and CBS fight for the other ones. Like that's, I mean, now look, there's so many NFL games to go through, and the CFL only has 3 games a week at most.
Well, it
To
has four. They can have four. They have four.
They can have 4. Now that's something that now if they get a 10th team, that adds an extra game to the slate. So,
Without creating awkward
yeah,
schedules, right? Because
exactly.
you have the awkward schedule is you'll have a team play on Tuesday and Sunday, or Wednesday and Sunday.
I still
Um,
think Friday doubleheader is a great idea. Saturday, I don't think Saturday gets enough love in terms of the early Saturday games because people aren't, you can get to people during the afternoon before they go and do their stuff on the Saturday night.
well, the Thursday thing is what that's just TSN. I think
Hmm.
believing in Thursday night football, and since there isn't any Thursday night football in the NFL, they do it with the CFL until the NFL comes in, which is fine. So if you have 5 games, just so we can do the math here, you could have 2 doubleheaders and the Thursday game, or you can have a triple header on Saturday, or you can have a if there's 5 games, maybe they slip one in on Sunday. I don't know. I
Monday night.
we get mixed messaging as far as whether the CFL does well against the NFL directly. We get mixed messaging there. I've seen numbers that speak well of the CFL, up against the NFL directly. But other people seem to think that, well, they don't stand a chance. But I disagree.
Yeah. Well, I think when you look at what made the can like people were saying, oh, the first Canada game, it was during a work time, not really, not many people would be watching on TV, and it had great numbers. I think the idea of how things are broadcasted need to change a little bit because watching habit has changed.
Well, when you're talking about Canada and you're talking about Canada doing something special, I'll make my point, and this is the point about the CFL. This is exactly, I think, the point that I've got something that's right now what just happened. Canada won the Davis Cup. How many people are watching the Davis Cup, and how many people are watching Canada lose and be eliminated from the World Cup? And they both happened pretty much simultaneously.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Usually there's a gentleman, his name is Adam Seaborn. He puts out, broadcasting data. And I don't know if he put out the Davis Cup because that was actually a very decent. no, people were hoping Davis Cup win and then Canada wins their first World Cup game. Um, yeah, I don't know if we got tennis doesn't do terribly, especially
No,
when Canadians are involved. So I know where
absolutely.
you're going with that, but I mean, soccer. I mean, World Cup is the biggest sporting event in the world, other than I think the NFL in terms of North America. Nothing will compare to that when it comes to ratings.
I think they do fine. I think tennis is very popular, especially when you have young women vying for the world championship. The big prize, right? We've seen the kind of numbers, we've seen the kind of interest. People love Canada, and when Canada's flag is raised, it's always a wonderful support system that Canada has, which is why pointing that Canada, didn't. I know they're not as good as those two teams that are going through. They caught a tough break. We talked about it when they caught they got a tough break. So we're still talking football, folks. In case you've just joined us, just that we're talking the other type of football
Well, Frank, it
on the
talks about
on the.
Canadian that's
Go ahead.
needed with the CFL. How many people, when talking about that CFL game, other than talking about Chad Kelly, we're also talking about Enoch Mwamba,
Absolutely.
Canadian player, Toronto player, like, and he swept both awards. Um, those are things that the Canadian like. Those are stories that I think the CFL has been trying to bring out more. I don't think it's talked about enough. You have guys like this that I still think could be playing, could get a shot in the NFL now. Like some of them are a bit older and past that point, but there are some players in the CFL that, and especially Canadian players, that I believe have enough talent to go to the NFL. The problem is people don't believe it because they don't see what the talent is like up here, and that's something with this game I liked was that it showed some of that talent. Like in Enoch Mwamba, you saw Andrew Harris, even Brady Oliveira for Winnipeg. Those are the stories that the CFL should be pushing a lot more, and I don't think they do because I don't know. Is it just a misconception on what people think about the CFL, or the CFL just they're trying to people we've heard it before try to it's
We're running we're running against the wind. There's gale
Mhm,
force winds, that the CFL is running against. And I say we because as a promoter of the game, I listen to and I take personal some of the insults.
mhm,
The first thing I'll say is, regardless of how good the players are, because we have players in the Canadian Football League that could play in the NFL who choose not to play in the NFL. We have players in the Canadian Football League who are given invitations to the NFL to see if they can make the team, and some of them stick, some of them make the league. So there's a bit of an overlap as far as talent's concerned between the NFL and the CFL. That in itself is not what the CFL is all about. What the CFL is all about is not as much the players as it is the game. If you think about the players too much, you forget about the best part of the Canadian Football League, and that's the game. The last 3 minutes of the game, the two downs to you have to get a first down and two downs, aggressive offenses. The defenses that do really well, and I like our special teams in the Canadian Football League. I think the special teams in the Canadian Football League are far more interesting than they are in the NFL. And I like to think that you know in the Canadian Football League, it takes a little bit more of a man to return the ball. He can't put his arm up and go, "Please let me catch it."
well, really,
I'm kidding, okay?
I
I don't
know
want to get. I'm kidding. I'm just
it just also shows how much the CFL wants to embrace every player. Like special team players on CFL teams are valuable. Like how
very
there's players that stick around on CFL teams for that very reason of what they can do on special teams because um there's so much said about you know and look the Argos especially like their special teams hasn't been the same in my opinion since Chad Owens left the team. They haven't had a guy like, and the CFL really hasn't had, other than what Brandon Banks did in 2019, there hasn't been that guy that can do all those things throughout the game: punt return, kick return, and on offense. I think that's something that the CFL, I'd like to see come back a little bit more in the CFL. But I
Well,
think
that's a tough ask though, David.
oh,
That's a lot of work in a game. What are you gonna ask for next? The players play defense and offense too?
what's his name? Why am I blanking? Oh my goodness. Oh my god, the receiver that's his father's a famous Minnesota Viking player. Oh my god. Why am I blank?
Oh, you're talking about Carter.
Yes, Jerron Carter would like to have a word with you on that because he has played both.
Yeah, but not at the same time. It's an either or thing for him,
Time.
especially because his coach is Chris Jones, who believes he's better defender than he is a better offensive receiver. I don't disagree with you, but I have to say that the Canadian Football League, as far as the game is concerned, if people just take the game for what it is, if they stop trying to suggest that automatically, and again, I apologize to people. Please do not misunderstand what I'm saying. Even if the players aren't as good in the Canadian Football League, it's not about the players. It's about the game, or should I say, about the game. It's not, it's not the players as much as everything. It's the players matter as much as the game does, but the game matters. I'm trying to frame it in a way that I believe, which is I believe the players are awesome. I believe the game is awesome, and I believe there are players that play in the Canadian Football League because of their ability and their style, their size, and all those things that Canadian Football League play allows. Smaller players, bigger players. We have in the Canadian Football League a far wider range of size than they do in the NFL. I know they have smaller players in the NFL, but here, it's just it's symbiotic. I mean, it works out well. And what you said about you know when it comes to special teams, they're important in the Canadian Football League because special teams in the Canadian Football League get a lot of time on the field, which gives players plenty of what they can do so that they can go offense or the defense. A lot of players who are in the depth list or chart, when you're looking at the list, you see players who are two and sometimes even three. They're doing a lot of heavy work in the special teams, and it helps afford them an opportunity to gain the respect of the coaching staff and to be a starter in another position.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I look at, I mean, even a guy like Lucky Whitehead, when he kind of broke into league, he had to do it on special teams first before he could become that star player on offense.
Absolutely.
I,
That's
I
what
just
happened with Brandon Banks, right? It was felt that he was a big asset in returns, but they wanted to make him happy too, and they gave him a chance to be a receiver, and he became, you know, what you were talking about, a player that does everything for a team. Like he returned kicks, and he was a great impactful receiver for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and he's part of the reason they made it to the Grey Cups that they did. We didn't see that here in Toronto a lot. We saw a little bit. He was running back kicks in the East Final, right? We saw him do it then. So
yeah, I actually think even I remember a guy like Deontay Spencer who was
yes,
doing it on both ends, both special teams and on offense. He was doing it so well, he got a shot in the NFL because of it. If you show that versatility, NFL teams don't they? While special teams is a little different in the NFL, where they don't necessarily take those chances I mean, they don't get those opportunities as much. Um, I think you look at where the CFL's helped players is that they can show off those abilities. If I'm and that's why actually a lot of American players when they come here they love that idea of being able to play on special teams and make plays on special teams because sometimes playing on special teams it feels like in the NFL you're going through the motions because of the fair catches.
Yeah, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
quarterbacks.
No, I tell you, there were a couple of things we didn't touch on last week, and we're contemplating taking some time off for Christmas. Um, where's Bo Levi Mitchell going?
I still don't think it's Hamilton
Hamilton.
unless Hamilton pays up big time because I think
You don't think there was a conversation, once removed conversation that's one step away from tampering happened?
if I personally don't think Hamilton makes that trade unless they feel confident that they're one of the front runners. I think what they can offer Bo Levi Mitchell that other teams may not be willing to offer him is a chance to start. Because you look around the CFL, I can only see one other team, realistically, one other team, maybe two, where they say we can make a pitch for Bo Levi Mitchell as a starter. Saskatchewan, maybe Montreal if they feel like if Trevor Harris doesn't return. I don't see how Trevor Harris doesn't go back to Montreal unless they want to go in a different direction. But
Do they go in a different direction now that the owner that was more involved now is going back into being involved? Cecchini is his contract is up. How much input does he have in regards to who the quarterback is? I think the person that has, we know who it is, the coach who is going to walk away from coaching and become a general manager. He will have a lot of say in who gets signed. But I suppose, David, in answer to your question, I think the real question is going to be when they decide who the head coach is,
who does the
who
head?
does the head coach want?
And if it's, I was trying to think like who could it be. Some have said Jason Moss, who has worked with Trevor Harris during his time in Toronto. Well, if let's say this, if Jason Moss gets
And Edmonton.
you know it's not going to be Cody Fajardo going to Montreal.
Oh, that's deep.
It's-
That is so deep.
but yeah, no, I totally agree with that on Montreal. But the thing about Montreal is they got to figure that out soon because if there's one thing you don't want to get caught is your pants down because you haven't made a decision on the coach and other teams are can get ahead. This is why Hamilton made the trade for Bo Levi Mitchell. They wanted to get ahead of what other teams are doing, right? Unfortunately, Bo Levi Mitchell's when you don't I don't know if they consulted with him to the point where he was saying he still wants to see what's out there because there's a couple of other
It's
options.
not just money. I don't think it'll be just money for Bo Levi Mitchell. I think he wants to win. He wants to do. Let's be clear. He wants to do what Banks and Harris did, right? If he goes to another team, he wants it to be to a team that might be able to, win a Grey Cup. But here's the thing: as far as quarterbacking is concerned, you are 100% right that teams are going to have to be proactive, and here's why they're going to have to be proactive because there are outstanding issues at quarterback. You talked about Montreal. Um, I see I see Harris as a good fit in Montreal. I think they like him in Montreal. I think anybody who's watching Montreal play, I don't think he could be blamed for the way they went out of the playoffs, and they made it to the Eastern final. That's one game before the Grey Cup, and anybody can win when you get there. We saw that this year. Not that the Argos didn't deserve it, but they weren't the favorite. So, we know anybody gets there, they can win. So I think that's a lock. But I think where things start getting interesting, does Evans leave completely the Canadian Football League? Turned off based on what happened? Does he have a change of heart and decide, well, you know what, I'm going to go there? They've got a contract. If I'm going to try and do something. So you have, and then the one that the one that could start the carousel going is Ottawa. How do they feel about Mazzoli? And how does the rest of the league feel about Mazzoli? Do they feel that his injury is not an ongoing issue with him and health? We saw it with, we saw it, we saw it with Caleros, right? there's nothing different between those two quarterbacks other than the good team and success that a good team can bring to a decent quarterback. Is Mazzoli as good as Caleros? That's the question that everybody's going to be asking. Ottawa's going to be the first to ask, and then they're going to make a decision. But where do they go if they don't go with Mazzoli? And that's what I mean about the coaching carousel.
Yeah, because I mean, Ottawa still has to figure out their coach too, right? And
Yeah,
I look at the CFL right now, and you brought up last week how this was probably the when we watched the East and West final. It was the best collection of quarterbacks we have seen play championship games because all quarterbacks were kind of on point. Now the question becomes: I look at every other team right now, every team in the CFL, only one team seems to kind of have a settled idea of what their quarterback situation is, and that's Calgary with
yeah.
Jake.
It's not BC because they might lose their quarterback.
They might lose their quarterback. You look at Edmonton. Sure, they have Taylor Cornelius signed.
They've made a commitment, but
They
what
made
have they committed to? We don't know yet. We
exactly.
know he has. We know he has ability. We know he has, the ability to run. We know he has a good arm, but is he a quarterback?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. We actually got a question here from Stevie Myers, who's asking, do we think Chad Kelly is capable to land, the number one job in the Argos? It all depends on. I know Ryan Dinwiddie said this week they're going to have those talks and see if they believe Chad Kelly is ready.
He said he believes it.
He
The
said,
coach himself said he believes Chad Kelly could start for the Argos next year.
and
To answer
so
your question, Stevie, the head coach that just won the Grey Cup,
Mhm.
the Grey Cup winning coach says, "Yep, he can play."
So the question now becomes, and this would actually be a good thing for the Argos because Chad Kelly is still on a rookie deal.
Yes.
So you can do what BC did with Nathan Rourke, which is make sure you set up Chad Kelly for the best possible route to success by having the support around him. And then the only thing you need to do is to get a capable backup.
Ooh, let me interject one point though. In this Canadian Football League, you need two quarterbacks.
Yep,
We saw that in the Grey Cup, didn't we?
we
You
did.
need two.
Um, the question here becomes: how many? What player would agree to come to Toronto, knowing they're going to be the backup behind Kelly,
Right.
but and be okay with that?
And be available for a price that won't interfere with getting the people that you've talked about in the past that if you like BC did, right? The money they saved on their quarterback, they helped in the offensive line in other places.
So
Yeah, I
Steve's
agree with you. Evans would come to Toronto if given the chance, but I don't think Toronto would take him.
I would think Toronto would wait for Hamilton to release him because Evans'
Yeah.
contract is paying him as a starter.
Yep.
And unless Evans is willing to take less to come to Toronto and fight it out with Chad Kelly for a starting job, I mean, it still would be Chad. I think it would be Chad Kelly's job to lose because he's been in the offense longer. He knows the coaching staff. He knows the language. But yeah, unless it won't be a trade. Let's just say this: Toronto is not helping Hamilton get out of Dane Evans' contract. Hamilton's going to have to make that decision to release him.
Absolutely. And
If
you know what else? And you know what else, David?
Hmm.
Evans is a reclamation project. Sound familiar for the Argos? They love reclamation projects.
They do, and they like a reclamation project that has success in winning games. I know he had a tough
Has
time.
he won enough? That's going to be the question in their mind, I guess.
Well, there was those questions about McLeod Bethel Thompson.
Absolutely. And that's another question. Does what we've heard and what we're assuming based on the drumbeat that we've heard emanating from his circle that he'll be retiring, he'll be stepping back and taking a back seat for his wife to carry on her career?
Yeah, there's definitely so many. There's a lot of variables when it comes to Dane Evans because I watched. I don't know if you watched the Undisputed series about Hamilton and Toronto. This is somebody who's proud of his heritage too, right?
Hmm.
Being in part of the First Nations, and I'm I think with Evans, sorry, with McLeod, he hasn't had that chance to be with his family, and that's why he wasn't at the parade. American Thanksgiving was the first time that he could really enjoy that with his family. I think this journey was a lot for him. He was also injured too. He's coming off the thumb dislocated thumb. When when you look at McLeod Beth Thompson, that was the only thing missing on his resume was that Grey Cup. And a lot of people thought in 2017 Ricky Ray should have retired on top after winning the Grey Cup. It's tough to tell a player when he's ready to retire because a player is kind of knowing when he's ready to retire. I think there's a chance McLeod will still want to play. I still think he will want to be that. If the itch and the desire to be on the field is still there, he will want. He'll be. I think he'll want to play, and I'm sure Toronto wouldn't say no to having him back. But the circumstances have to be right for both parties, and I
Now there
think
was a hint also, let's keep this in mind too as well, that Kelly did kind of say maybe we should renegotiate. And
I
that
don't.
will have a bearing.
Yeah, see, like if I'm Chad Kelly, I'm betting on myself this year for
Right.
this for that year to get a bigger payday. Because yeah, I think you said you asked or somebody asked him about going to Saskatchewan. He said, "Well, the price just went up." I
Yeah.
think there's a bit of a misconception here on Chad Kelly's part about the CFL contract. Because let's be real. Let's also talk about that. In the NFL, you can restructure a contract to pay out certain contracts differently. CFL, you can do that to a degree, um, but Chad Kelly's got to understand that the Argos aren't going to want to. The only way they're going to give him more money is if they get a commitment out of him for more years, and then they'll put those bonuses down the road. So I just think Chad Kelly is caught in the moment right now after winning, and he's kind of the talk of the town. He could be that guy. You play this year, your first full year as a starter, then let's talk about getting that contract. And when I'm talking about a contract, because Stevie wants to know how much would Chad Kelly get, like he's on a
For
rookie
now,
this year for now. Starters in the CFL, if you're a decent starter and you're successful, you get to that 300 to 400 range.
yeah, Bethel Thompson made 400 and he was the sixth highest paid quarterback.
Yeah, right. Levi Mitchell has made well over 8.
Half a million, eight. Yeah,
Michael Riley made 8, over 800,000.
that's too much.
It is.
Unless they figure out a way, because that eats away too much of the the quarterback gets the money, but he doesn't get the team. It's unfortunate, but that's essentially what happens. I mean, we look at the Argos and we saw a bunch of numbers thrown out there as far as what the Argos earned. They had a lot of players at positions who earned the highest amount of money, but they also had players like Banks and even if you consider Macbeth a starter, a good starter in the Canadian Football League, who were underpaid. Andrew Harris didn't make top dollar either. So, and
He
they
was
had
top
some
underpaid
rookies.
running
They
back.
had some rookies or some players who on rookie contracts, like Willette, that I'm sure they weren't making a boatload of money.
I look at when you see how
That's what you need to do to win. You have to have good players that are underpaid. That's the reality of it.
you need to have a good core, right, and be able to fill that core with talent that's not making as much. I look at Winnipeg, Willie Jefferson, Adam Bighill, Jeff Colaro,
Caleros,
and a couple of their offensive linemen get paid the big bucks. Then they find a Dalton Schuin who can be paid on a rookie salary. They find these other guys that they can plug in, not necessarily making the big bucks, but enough that they can do it. And that's actually what the Argos did in a way, right?
right? That's what you have to do.
Yeah, I think like Wynn McManus, Enoch Mwamba.
Wynn McManus was one of the highest paid linebackers in the league.
I look at Jagarrett Davis. He didn't come cheap to Toronto,
Nope.
Brandon Banks did take a discount to come to Toronto because he wanted to win. And he's
He
actually on a
thought he could
2-year
do it.
deal. I don't know if the Argos keep him around for the second year of that deal just because he might not be on an expensive deal, but can you find somebody else that
For that price?
for that price? I think they want to look at bringing Curly Giddens Jr. back. Someone like DeVaris Daniels is another one that you want to bring back. The Argos have a lot of work to do. When you look at the veterans that are up, they can't blow their money on a quarterback. They got to make sure that they can bring and they want to establish that depth. They want to keep that depth for when guys get injured, somebody else can step up. And the only way you can do that is if you keep everything at a reasonable rate, right? Some of these guys may want to stick around and they won't want too many they won't overdo it when it comes to what they want to make, but you have to be sensible. The Argos in after 2017, they went out and they signed a bunch of guys. I think who was it that they signed in free agency? I I look at I'm gonna look at it here. If the Argos have gone out and gone for receivers when they should have been, and it costs them an offensive lineman, they go out for you know
They
they
get a
tried.
quarterback, they give up 2 draft picks.
Yeah, I remember when they tried to get Bolivia Mitchell to come to Toronto the first time.
They offered him a lot of money.
They
They
offered,
offered him more than Calgary did.
yeah, yeah, they did. They offered him close. I think it was close to 900, is what I had heard, is what they were offering, and I was like, that's a little much when you think of. I remember Gerard Walker was paid the highest amount out of any receiver in the CFL when he came to Toronto. That really set the team back because Gerard Walker is an incredible talent, but
Let's put it let me see if I can put a way of explaining it. For every player that you sign at top dollar, you got to find at least 2 players that can play on your team for a very inexpensive rate to pay for that guy because it's a balance, right? So the more you pay players, the less you got to pay elsewhere. And that's the dance that the Argos did so well. And the other thing, David, is they also got helped a little bit with injuries. I know that sounds silly because how can we talk about injuries being helpful? Well, the injury to Harris helped because, with his injury, that money was off the table and they were able to do other things. It's that's the thing about the cap, right? There's a lot of reasons why what you said is 100% true. There has to be depth. You have to have players that you can bring in if somebody goes down, and they've got to fit into your cap space.
yeah, and that's the big one there. Stevie brought up the idea that Kenny Lawler when he went to Edmonton, I believe it was Edmonton, got over 300,000.
Yep,
Edmonton was not a receiver away from being a good team. I think they were hoping that having a good receiver would help the quarterbacks, but I think
their
that
young quarterback.
well that too. Um, so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this whole carousel plays out because I think there's going to be a lot of movement based on Vernon Adams. At least with BC, they have Vernon Adams Jr. for another year, so they can go with Vernon if they feel like he's good enough to replace Rourke if Rourke were to get
Be
an
gone.
opportunity. Um, I look at Saskatchewan. They could throw good money at a quarterback if they really feel like it. But if you look at Saskatchewan, who wants to go to the West and face those really good teams in the West and a really bad offensive line? I think arguably the worst offensive line in the CFL. I mean, Stevie said, why not go to the East Division where this feels like the path to a Grey Cup is easier? I wouldn't say it's easier. I think it's less. It's more open, right? It's less predictable in the East because how many people thought of Montreal Toronto as the East final? A lot of people probably thought Hamilton was going to be going there.
or the Western representative.
right?
uh, During the season, beginning of the season, there, Saskatchewan wasn't worried about the crossover. They were doing fine in their own division. It was BC, and then BC just took off. That basically ended up being the team that was making us in their division. Um, you know, Stevie, as far as Speedy Banks is concerned, what might happen, and I say this because it's like what I'd like to see, being a football fan and respectful of all the teams and loving the CFL. I would love him to go back to Hamilton, sign a contract, and retire.
I think I think he should. I think this was the one thing he said he didn't have much left in terms of left in the tank. So I'm thinking that this was probably him saying once he get that Grey Cup, maybe he'll think he at least he has a contract and that he doesn't have to make the decision right now. He might want to
Right.
wait, but I think the Argos might even ask him like, "Do you want to play next year? Because we might cut you because we might need to use that money somewhere else." And there's bigger needs, in my opinion, than what Brandon Banks. If Brandon Banks gets released, can he go back to Hamilton as like a player if he wants to still play? But I do think if he
I
is,
don't think I don't I think he's I think he's ready to retire until he thinks about retiring, because when you have a plan in place and you decide, let's say in his head he goes, if I win the Grey Cup this year, I'm retiring. That's no guarantee that he's going to retire. All I'm saying is, and all I'm trying to say is that if he decides to retire, I hope he does it as a Hamilton Tiger Cat. Not because I don't respect him as a Toronto Argonaut, but I think seeing him in the cat stripes retire, um, and then have the Grey Cup too. I think he's well loved there. I don't think there's many fans that begrudged him the opportunity to win a Grey Cup, especially considering they knew that it wasn't just him that was leaving Hamilton. It was kind of a mutual decision, and that's what they said at the beginning of the year. It was a mutual decision. He said that himself. If you remember one of the first meetings we had with him.
I think he realized too that he was falling out of favor in Hamilton, and look, that team wanted a change. They wanted to go in a different direction. He kind of saw the writing on the wall after that Grey Cup too. So yeah, I think what would make the most sense is the Argos potentially would release him, and he goes and he signs that contract to retire in Hamilton. That's what my if I had to give my prediction. I don't think he comes back. At least he won't be back in Toronto. Maybe
Let's
not.
take a couple of minutes, David. You wanted to talk about the parade. Well, the parade that didn't happen. That
Oh,
instead
the
was just
rally.
the rally.
What do you think about that? I don't know. I A lot of
It
people
was
are like,
scary at first. It was scary at first because the crowd seemed pretty small. I have to say, by the time the rally started, I was far more satisfied with the amount of people. Yes, it was probably around 1,000 people. You consider there were 2 million for the Raptors. Um, so it wasn't a big crowd, but the people who were there were dedicated Argo fans. Now, this is going to sound like an excuse. We heard there was problems with the subway, with people getting there. Some of us thought that it would have been better at City Hall, might have been a better turnout. I don't know. But what I can say is the Argos, MLSC, they did a bang up job. You know, the event itself was awesome, in my opinion.
well, it was good. I know some people. The thing was is with the crowd size. The Grey Cup was Sunday, and people only had a few days to get ready for a rally. When
I didn't have any days to get ready. I landed
when the
very late.
when the Raptors won, it was they had a good enough time between that and the rally. It was also summertime, so the weather was a little more cooperative, and it was the Raptors' first NBA title. It's a big deal, and not many people. And who knows when the Raptors will win a title again? Argos fans could be like, You know what? Every 5 years we get to experience this, so maybe.
I'll go in 5 years. I don't feel like going to this one. The
Yeah,
weather's not
well,
so.
I know that I'll be back there in 5 years, so it's okay.
Oh,
But I think what
you're really ticking off the Hamilton fans. You know that, eh?
eh, I mean, just win a Grey Cup. That's okay.
Yeah.
We'll get there. I mean, when I see when I what I liked about that about the rally was it might not have been a lot of people, but it was the most passionate people that were there.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything bad that came out of it. Like I didn't go there. I didn't leave that rally thinking, man, that was just dreadful. It was terrible. Like it accomplished what it needed to accomplish. The right I mean, I was a little surprised about the reception that Tannenbaum and Manning got, considering how I hear Argos fans talk about them. I think maybe they were just being respectful to those two individuals. Uh, but I think it was nice for, I think pinball. While he said it was going to be short, that wasn't very short pinball. Uh, I think he did a good job of you know making them look good, making Tannenbaum and Manning look good for everything, and you know you get the sense that what his vision is of making sure that this isn't a one and done. I think he truly meant that, and I think when you see how the whole team came together and how they all kind of embraced each other, and you saw it on that stage, and you saw it the last few days. I think like they just want to keep this momentum going. I hope they can. They got to do their best. It won't be easy, but I think that that's what they want to accomplish. They want to make sure that fans know that this isn't something that they want to be a one and done. It would be nice if they would have these things not every 5 years.
Well, they have a coach that figured out how to win. They had a quarterback, um, again, qualified statement because he got injured at the end of the game, that brought him to the precipice of winning the championship. And then they had the ultimate gift that Canadian Football League teams need, which is a second quarterback who came in and had some success, moved the ball, avoided being tackled. They lived what we talk about in the Canadian Football League. The biggest thing is those two quarterbacks. We could be having a conversation today if Kelly doesn't do what he did in the last quarter, which is move the ball forward, not make any major mistakes, and put the team in a position to win the game, right? If that doesn't happen, we have a completely different conversation this day, and then there's the issue with if McLeod doesn't get hurt and he goes through and he continues that third quarter and fourth quarter look a lot alike, and then the Argos don't win the Grey Cup.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that kind of go into play. I will say this: at the rally, there were two players who were more popular. They're kind of battling popularity: Enoch Mwamba and
Yep.
Chad Kelly. We heard it when we were interviewing Chad Kelly. The fans were screaming, chanting his name.
They've been screaming for him all year. You and I have heard it all year. And now, with the way that game ended in his hands, next year it's just going to even be more intense as far as him being the quarterback is concerned. And McLeod Bethel Thompson may decide not to come back for other reasons, and then the Argos may settle into having Kelly as their quarterback, and then we'll have a Ricky Ray returning to the team like we saw in Bethel Thompson's skin. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
he could have a last minute go. You know what? I'm going to play another year. Who wants me?
He could very
Right?
well could. I also just feel like he loves Toronto so much that I don't know if he sees himself playing anywhere else. And if he sees that Kelly is ready to step in, like I don't know. I feel like when you look at McLeod, he loves Toronto so much, and and Toronto's just the perfect fit for him as a city. I don't know how he would work anywhere else. Personally, I don't know, but I mean, it's up to whether McLeod just feels he wants to go have another go at it.
Yeah, that's going to be the key. Is that what does McLeod Bethel Thompson? Does he feel he has another year in him? Does he feel everything, the pressure that he seemed to feel? If you listen to the way he spoke, the different press conferences, he seemed like a frustrated person who in the skin of trying to help his teammates and say things that he felt his teammates were saying and that he was standing up on their behalf, the way the team practices, the support the team gets, all that stuff that he was saying sounds to me like a guy who's very frustrated, and I'm wondering does he get the response from the organization and the league that he wants to see, and does that egg him on into coming back? Because, David, that's the other thing. He was not a happy camper in the way the league and the way the team was received. And I'll use the phrase he used: we can all be better. He said that numerous times.
Yeah, and maybe he feels like his role will be better served helping the CFLPA.
Who knows? Because he does have a lot of love for his teammates and football, and we'll see. How he and his wife and his family deal with the off season, and if there is a jumping off point to join the league again. We'll see. We'll hear about it, and whatever he decides, I hope the best for him because he's a quality human being, and nothing says CFL more than quality human beings as players, coaches, general managers, and for the most part, owners. I think. Even though some people look negatively at some ownership, I think mostly the ownership that's in the Canadian Football League is the reason why the league exists, because it can't exist without 100% backing of the ownership.
No, definitely. I mean, that that's always ownership may say they might be seeing the benefit of winning the Grey Cup and say, okay, what can we do to make sure that this stays? Right? What are we going to do to make sure that this continues?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and one that I think I think will get answered come January. Right now, there'll be a lot of thinking. There are some teams that are looking to fill some holes before Christmas in coaching, like Saskatchewan, and other teams have other issues. They're going to have to make decisions on re-upping players. We've already seen Winnipeg, talk about Claros, Jefferson, so we'll see. I mean, this offseason is going to be very interesting because now you have a new Grey Cup champ, and every team now knows they have a shot at it because, the Argos only a few short years ago were not that impactful. They
No,
weren't a very good team just a few short years ago. So there's a lot of teams that know in a few short years it can happen for you.
definitely.
All
No,
right, David.
I think when you look at what this year has showed, yeah, Winnipeg could have easily have won that game. But it's a reminder that in the CFL, if you can build a strong enough group of players that can make plays at the right time, and you get to that big game, it's getting to the game that's the most important part. And once you get there, it's the belief that you can win no matter what anybody else is saying. So maybe teams that's I think what the Argos kept saying that nobody thought they could win, and they used that as fuel.
Absolutely. And so will every other team, and so do they at this time, because everybody has a shot to win it now. It's reset come May. It'll be a reset, and we'll see what happens. David, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Frank.
He is David. You're welcome. He is David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Candid Frank.